everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on why great intelligence starts with great information. In the session are two experts in the field, Jesper Martel and Toby Cook. Jesper Martel is the CEO and co-founder of Commentelli. Toby is the Chief Sales Officer at OPoint. With over 25 years of experience in news and IT, Toby previously led OPoint's Risk and Trading Signals division.
Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we will be speaking about one of my favorite topics, one of the pillars of a competitive intelligence solution, namely information or sources or content or what you ever want to call it. And with me today I have Toby from OPoint. We have known each other for many years and done a couple of these webinars before as well. As many of you may know, OPoint News is one of the primary news providers to Commentelli. It's well integrated, it's very transparent within intelligence today, and people can set up their source searches right in the platform. But I was thinking, Toby, for those who don't know OPoint so much, perhaps you could just introduce OPoint a little bit, your source coverage, and say a few words about OPoint.
Sure, thanks, Jesper. Yes, I'd love to. So OPoint is a web crawling company that was founded over 25 years ago. We specialize exclusively in capturing news content from around the world and delivering that to our clients, including Commentelli. There's a few things that make us unique, which we'll talk about later in the call today. But primarily, it's our breadth of coverage. We currently crawl nearly 250,000 sources 24/7, allows us to deliver 3 to 3.5 million news articles per day, tagged and enriched with lots of metadata, which we will, I'm sure, talk about.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much. I think you are very well positioned to talk about this topic today as well. So we have the format for this webinar is we try to make it as interactive as possible. We've set up a number. We've got 5 or 6 questions here, but please feel free to jump in if you have any questions for me or Toby as we go along. And as Julia explained, we will have a Q&A session at the end, but let's try and make this more of a conversation and a dialogue as we go along. So the 6 questions that we brainstormed around are these. Why does source quality determine insight quality? So we'll have a chat about that. We'll talk about what then defines a high quality source. What are the characteristics of a good information source? How do you build a good source portfolio that is suitable to your intelligence work? We'll talk about how you can build a good information foundation and give some tips and ideas on that. Of course, we can't avoid the topic of AI, so we'll have a little of discussion on that as well. And then end off, depending on time, we'll talk a little bit about the benefits that you can get from working with good sources. But let's get started then with the very first question. Why does source quality decide intelligence quality or insight quality? Do you want to do a quick first start on that, Toby?
Yeah, sure. And there's a really, it almost sounds trite and simple, but the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, I think almost totally answers that question. We take source quality as the very first pillar of building a solution that is worthwhile for our clients. And we do that the old-fashioned way. We have a team of human experts that visit and review every single site that we crawl. If our experts haven't looked at a site and identified that it's creating its own valuable, unique content, we don't crawl it, full stop. If it's clickbait, if it's AI generated, if we can tell, if it's just recirculating or republishing other people's content, we're not interested. We only want it if it's generating its own unique content, because otherwise it just adds noise. And the garbage in, garbage out principle 100% holds true for this.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I mean a lot of people are talking about AI these days, but at the very core, you have to have good information sources. Otherwise, you're just going to get garbage out. And what we see is that this is becoming, or people are starting to realize this, that you have to have trusted sources. It doesn't matter how good your CI platform is or how good your AI technology is. If you feed it with poor quality data that is, outdated or even false and fake in some cases, then you're going to get very poor results coming out of that. So I feel that something that, I mean, when we started with this a few years ago, good sources was almost considered sometimes, a luxury or an extra that only a few people could afford. But now I feel that this is becoming more and more core, and that you have to have it almost as a risk insurance, for not making bad decisions. You have to have good quality sources.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And of course, with technology, what makes up a good source, or rather a good set of sources, is different. We find there's a split in our customers of whether they want a relatively small number of really high profile, almost brand name news sources, or
Mhm.
whether, and in fact, this makes up the majority of our customers now, whether those sources are too or almost too late. Once a story gets into those brand names, it's too late. They need to pick a story up as it develops, maybe
Yeah,
at local level around the world, in local business sources.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that distinction is quite important to us.
Mhm. No, and that kind of brings us almost to the next question is okay, I think it's quite straightforward. I mean, garbage in, garbage out, as you say. But then how would you define a high quality source? What are some of the key criteria that you put on a good source once you decide which ones you want to, include
Yeah,
in your collection?
and it's interesting, and frankly, we could probably talk for an hour about just this subject
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
is absolutely the core of what we do. Because whilst the numbers game and being able to say, "Hey, we've got a quarter of a million sources," that's
Hmm.
fantastic. But if it was a quarter of a million garbage sources, that would be the worst service you could imagine for a news aggregator. It comes back to what I said at the start. We review every site for certain criteria.
Hmm.
Firstly, does it create its own unique content? So
Hmm.
we are not interested in sites that are just republishing other people's content or using AI to regurgitate other people's content and pretend it's their own unique sources. So if we can
Hmm.
detect that, we will avoid those sites and we will not crawl them. Then for us, the next criteria is really obvious for a commercial organization. Is it going to be valuable and interesting to our customers?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if it isn't, there is no point us crawling it. We're just adding noise to the system. So we evaluate that. The only way we can know that is by keeping close to our customers, talking to them, and understanding what it is that they want to know,
Mhm.
what type of information they're after, what type of news stories are useful to them, and the way that they want to receive them. So it's all a case
Mhm.
of understanding the needs of our end users and our customers' end users, more importantly.
Mhm. And can you say a little bit more about what that process looks like? I mean, how does a source get qualified enough to be included?
Yeah,
And can sources be excluded at some point as well?
yes, sources certainly get excluded as well. So we've been going for 25 years, so we are no longer in a situation where there are hundreds of thousands of sites that are famous and great news generators that we aren't crawling. So it's a relatively smaller number of sites that we're not crawling.
Mhm.
Obviously, the first and most important way for these sites to come to our attention is a customer references
Okay.
them to
Yeah,
us. And
yeah,
honestly, that is by far the biggest
okay.
source of
Yeah.
new sources coming into our pipeline.
Mhm.
And then, but if a customer, just because a customer has said, "Can you crawl XYZ," doesn't mean we'll automatically do it. Then we send our expert reviewers to look at the site.
Mhm.
They will see if technically it will work. They see if the content is unique, because they can check it across the other sources that we have and see if it's just regurgitating other people's content. We can see if it generates a significant amount of volume. So if a site only publishes one story every month or every week or so, we probably wouldn't want to add it, because there are challenges for us and for any web crawler that make it not worthwhile. But if a site generates enough valuable content at enough frequency, then we will add it. And again, it's 100%. Is it useful to our clients? Do our clients want to receive it?
Good. And are there any sources that you wish you had in your collection that you don't have today? And if so, why not?
So that's a good question. And to be honest, there's a for me a fairly amusing answer. So many of you will know who my competitors are, and a couple of them shout very loudly about some very famous sources. And this has been true for the 25 years I've been selling aggregated news feeds from London. The two sources that we get quoted all the time are New York Times, which we're not allowed to crawl because it has an exclusive relationship with someone else, and Wall Street Journal, which we're not allowed to crawl because it's owned by someone else. I get asked for those all the time. Would it have made my life easier for the last 25 years if I could just say yes to all of those? Yeah. Would it make our service any better? Probably not. The reality is that for most of my customers, and I would guess probably your customers as well, by the time a story has got to those press sources, it's already broken somewhere else first, and it is almost immediately republished elsewhere. So yeah, the brand names would be good. We did some years ago, some analysis of, I won't say which of those two sources, but it was one of those two sources against a large aggregated news feed from a well-known other news supplier, not OPoint. And it was shown that in a week there was only one article that wasn't published somewhere else almost immediately, and it was a recipe for chocolate cookies. So yeah, it would have made my life easier. But
it must have been a really good chocolate recipe.
It must have been damn good chocolate cookie for the amount they charge.
Now that's interesting. That sometimes these big mainstream media sources are perhaps a little bit late on the ball.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say they're late on the ball, but there's only so many stories that one source can ever realistically publish. So you've got the handful of brand name news outlets, those two. You've got Reuters, you've got Bloomberg, Dow Jones. They can only realistically publish so many stories per day. So they're never going to have the granular global coverage at a real granular level for every single company. If you're an individual human reading news and you want to be up to date and broadly abreast of what's going on, then any of those four titles and some others are fantastic if you're reading just one source. But if you're doing systematic review of the news using electronic systems to either assist or with AI certainly, then you will get better coverage of news if you use a news aggregator that has wider coverage than any one of those sources.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good, thanks for that, and for sharing the story as well. Takeaway from this is really what you said in the beginning as well. It's almost it's not the number of sources, and I've seen that some, as you say, some companies boast by having millions of sources, but that's not really a good measurement then for quality. It's more it almost sounds like less is more sometimes.
Absolutely. In fact, that reminds me, and I haven't mentioned this for years. You may remember I worked for another news aggregator decades ago, and they had the strap line, read less, know more. And you know what? I think that still holds true. A good news solution will allow you to read less but know more.
Yeah. No, there's always, I think, the fear of missing out or missing a story, and that's why people want to cover every single story. But as you say, sooner or later it pops up in one of the media outlets. All right, let's move on then. Now we know that sources are important, and what are good sources. So the question then is, how do you identify any gaps that you might have in the sources that you're working with? And this is something that we often come up with when we set up CI platforms. This is one of the first steps. We usually start with something we call an information needs analysis, where we look at what sources are valuable from a customer perspective. And here what we do is it's quite important, because often companies start looking at what sources do we have and what content do we have, and then they start from that viewpoint. We try and start more with the strategic priorities, or what are the key intelligence questions and topics, and what are the strategic issues that a company have, and then work sort of backwards from there to find the sources that are best. So it's not about looking at what sources we're working with today, but more what sources do we need to be able to cover some of the things that are mentioned here. How do we find information about competitors and technology and markets and customers, etc. And I think the way we do it is very similar to what you said. It's very much about asking the customers. Asking the customers what is important to them, asking them what are some of the strategic questions that we should be looking at, and then working from there, and not just asking the CI analysts, but asking quite broadly across the organization. So looking at both marketing and sales, asking R&D departments, what are sources that you use today that you trust, that you think are reliable, and then from there trying to build a good content portfolio. And that is very much doing surveys, going out asking these questions. And I think what we often find here is that organizations are very good at defining which competitors and which markets and the basic intelligence topics. They're quite good at defining that, but where it's typically much harder is to find where can we find early warning signals, or where can we find things that affect us maybe in other industries that are next to. They're very good at their own industry and their own topics, but not sort of what's happening outside of them, which is sometimes the most important. So I think that's and then you sort of have to go through that process and evaluate different sources and test them, and I think the final thing is once you've identified them, be prepared also to pay for quality content. I think is important. Sometimes companies are looking for the cheapest open sources, but then I think you sort of bite yourself sort of in getting lower quality. So I think those are some of the things that we work with.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, one of the things that we do when we're talking to new customers is steer them away from asking for specific sources and get them to explain to us what they actually want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And then we like to create feeds built around the subject matter, not the source matter. And the reason we do it that way around is it is theoretically possible to name the 20 top sites or sources that you would need to cover for a particular industry today. But if you build a filter based on just those 20 sites, if a new one comes along tomorrow or one of them goes out of business, your filter will become inaccurate. And so, whereas if you build a subject-based set of filters or requirements, that doesn't matter what the underlying sources, how they change underneath, you will still get the right information through. So I have to say, I tend to steer away from give us a list of sources you want, rather
sources. Exactly. That sounds a bit similar to our experiences as well. Then,
I'm
more
sure.
More focus on what do you want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So once we have this done and we've identified gaps, any sort of ideas on how an organization can build a good information portfolio? Any thoughts on that?
Um, I think every organisation changes is different, isn't it? Depending on the size of the organisation and the whether they want a solution that's effectively off the shelf or whether they want to build their own at the moment. The landscape is changing. I know we're going to talk about AI later on, but the landscape's
Yeah,
changing
yeah,
because organisations now have the ability to do a lot more analysis and filtering of information with their own internal systems than
yeah.
they did maybe 10 or 15 or even 5 years ago, probably. And I'm sure you probably have as much or more experience of that than I do, maybe.
Yeah. No, and I think maybe this is maybe kind of a boring answer, but it's very much about having this structure and governance and control and discipline on what you put into the system, so that you're always checking. So we've made a list. These are 5 things that we typically bring up. But again, it's about aligning what you're monitoring to your strategy, having this mixture of open sources and specialized sources, ensuring that you cover all the areas that are important for you, etc. So it's many of these things mentioned here that we've already talked about. But at the end of the day, I think it's very much about being being very structured, as boring as that sounds.
Yeah, well, it may be a boring answer, but it doesn't mean it's not right. That's absolutely the correct approach. And the premium content is interesting. People think of a web crawler as maybe that we wouldn't be interested in premium content, but that's not true at all. We are absolutely happy and deliver premium content to many of our customers, and we are absolutely black and white. If you have a license for a content, we'll deliver it to you. If you don't have a
Yeah.
license, we will not allow you to receive it. Because at the end of the day, we're owned by 4 of the largest publishers in Scandinavia. We were created to help distribute news content for the IP owners, and that's what we do. We work closely with some of the biggest news publishers in the world to distribute their content and also to look for illegal distribution of their content. So making sure that is done properly is absolutely core to what we do.
Yeah, yeah. Good. And that's also, I think, one of the big reasons that we work with you as well, because you put so much emphasis on that. And it's a tricky question, I know. And I think it's becoming more important the more AI people are using as well.
Yes, AI is a difficult subject for the whole news industry, and I know
Yeah.
we're coming on to talk about that, so I'll.
Yeah, no, and that
Oh,
follows on. That comes right into that
I'm glad it
tricky
stalled it so
question.
long.
But it is, I mean, a big disruptor, of course. And I mean, what's your take on this? On how does AI affect the news industry?
Well, it's having a huge effect on the news industry. Some good and some definitely not so good. We talk to news publishers all the time. I have a colleague, John Anders, whose job is just to talk to news publishers and the trade organisations. And over and over and over again, they tell us that AI services like Google Gemini and various others that are extracting data from news articles and just surfacing a snippet without redirecting web visitors to their site is killing websites, site traffic. 80 or 90% downturn in visitors, and that's catastrophic for news. It's catastrophic for news agencies and news sites, and not something that we at all want to support, because we're a news aggregator, and if these news aggregators go out of business, we haven't got a business. So we really want to support them.
No, and it seems a bit short-sighted. I can understand that you want to take what's there, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's going to lead that I mean, a few years there won't be any news publishers, and then there will be zero content to apply AI on. So I think it's yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's absolutely short-sighted. We are doing everything we can to make sure that the people that create valuable content get the visitors and get the recognition and get the money that they deserve.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's the case with AI, that I mean, the positive thing is when you apply AI to high quality sources, then it accelerates things, and you become better at finding, trends and patterns and things like that. But then when it's applied to poor sources, then it also goes the other way. It sort of can have a negative impact as well. And you get, hallucinations and false information coming out of it. So really, it's AI is very much a multiplier of what you put into it, for better or worse.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I think we are probably one of the few organisations around in the information sector that aren't shouting loudly about using AI. And in fact,
Mhm,
we don't use AI. We have
mhm,
humans that choose which sites we should crawl.
yeah.
We have very traditional methods of filtering and adding the metadata.
Mhm,
There's some AI involved, but very little, and it's not an AI-led system. So we simply are not layering AI on top of anything. Um,
mhm,
and that's remarkably well received when I say that bluntly to a customer.
mhm,
Much, much more common that the customers say, "Oh, fantastic.
mhm,
We're
mhm,
fed up with all these bad AI results." So it is a risk getting involved with AI, but there are tremendous opportunities as well.
yeah, yeah. And what do you see some of the opportunities? I mean, if you look 3 years ahead, and with AI, will it make your world easier or harder to be in? And I mean, if you were to give some sort of a
Do you
prediction.
know? So there are very positive things to be brought from AI. I think signal detection is one of them. There is no reason why you can't use AI to detect signals and then direct people to the sites or the suppliers or the sources that are maybe more expensive, but where the
Yeah,
signal originates.
yeah.
Um, our biggest area of growth at the moment for the last 2 or 3 years has been risk generally,
Yeah.
KYC, AML, ESG, those type of areas, and be able to detect risk across 250,000 sources.
Hmm.
It's not possible manually. Um,
No.
Even with electronic filters, it's difficult. But if you use AI, it can greatly enhance the results that you get, cut down the noise, and deliver more correct positives as opposed to false positives.
Yeah.
And if that stops bad people doing bad things, then I've made the world a better place.
Yeah. But so then you're saying maybe use AI to find these signals, but once you find a signal, make sure that it's clicked through to the original source, and where you have the full text and everything. So
100% we want people to click through to original sources. We do not
yeah,
want to stop people going to the sites.
yeah, yeah. Mm. Good. And you mentioned that you do some manual work on this as well, but any other sort of thoughts on how you can combine AI technology with manual filtering and classification as well?
Yeah, so we have an ongoing project in our collections team with the scraping side. We have no intention of taking away the human review or to check that the sites are relevant, but we are increasing the use of AI systems to check that the crawlers work more efficiently, so they capture the right content, they don't capture incorrect content, they crawl the right parts of the site as the site morphs and grows and changes its layout. We follow that more correctly using AI rather than having to send humans to review that all the time, but still human led.
Yeah, yeah. And does that mean that that you or your customers also have industry experts, or where is that sort of layer in this equation?
So we are experts in news generally, not
Yeah,
experts in news for any particular industry. Although
yeah,
perhaps in media monitoring that may not be quite true.
yeah,
We probably
yeah,
are for that
yeah,
industry. So that means we tend not to have industry experts. Our
yeah,
customers would tend to have the industry experts.
yeah,
We tend to deliver most often to industry experts such as yourselves. So you
yeah, yeah,
know about the competitive intelligence market better than we do. Um, but we're better at capturing news. So we deliver the news. You tell us which bits, you tell us what sources, you tell us what subjects.
yeah,
And the same applies for all our other customers. So whether it's KYC, AML, ESG, whatever sector they're in, we're not experts on that. And in fact, when we talk to any of them, even if they're in the same sector, they will disagree slightly on what they want. So we are agnostic of industry and just we have a flexible and powerful enough system that allows each customer to define what they want and what they think is the perfect solution.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. That is very much aligned with our thinking as well. It's hard for us to be experts in all of our customers' industries. We have to leave that to them. And then we can be experts in sources or in competitive intelligence and help them with that. Yeah. Good. So final question, coming towards the end. And please, if you have any questions for me and or Toby, then make sure to type them in the chat box. But this is also, I mean, this is very much about benefits. I mean, if you get all this in place, what are the things that you think will help decision makers? And these are some of the things that we find. Obviously, if they have access to sources that they trust, then they can make their decisions with much more confidence. I think that's maybe number one. And that leads to number two as well. If they have trusted sources, they can be more confident, and then that means that they can react much faster if something happens in their business environment, and that in turn makes them more proactive, so that they can be prepared when things happen instead of just reacting to a new story after it has happened. And I think these are maybe the three main things that having high quality sources will help you with. Anything you'd like to add or comment on this?
No, well, it goes back to what I said earlier. We have two types of customer, and they would define world-class sources in different ways. We have one type of customer who very definitely thinks that it's the brand name, the Reuters, the Bloombergs of this world that are a world-class source. The Guardian in the UK. We have one type of customer that thinks that, and we have another type of customer that thinks that's too late or too much for a global source. I need the local inside business knowledge at a local level. The people that tell us there's industrial action in Vietnam, or there's been a famine in Brazil, or that type of you get the type of thing. And so their definition of world-class sources is different.
Yeah.
But if the customer thinks it, they're right.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think we're completely in agreement on that. So final slide here, and this is sort of our concept in intelligence as a solution, where we believe it's very important to have not just the software platform, the technology in the middle there, which is where we have our expertise, but also on the left side, we've been talking about today the data integrations, but then the expertise as well on how to do things. And I think just to try to summarize a little bit before we go into the Q&A session, I think I hear three takeaways from you. I mean, the first one is a garbage in, garbage out. I think getting good quality insights and intelligence very much starts with having good content feeds, and I think that's very obvious. But the other thing that struck me was that when we talk about customers, I do feel that many leading organizations are starting to treat their information sources as a more strategic asset. And so it's becoming much more valuable, maybe one of the most valuable assets actually that a customer or a company can have is its information sources. And I see that the companies that are putting a lot of effort into this, they are continuously evaluating their sources, asking their users what is a good source, what is a bad source, and changing their data portfolios all the time, having them very structured and controlled. So I think that's kind of a new way of seeing content sources that I think is fascinating. And only when they've done that work, the boring structuring and evaluation, only then they start applying AI technology on it. So first have the sort of the information foundation in place, and then start working with AI. Whilst many organizations are doing it the other way around, they just put AI on what they have, and then are not always the best results. And then, of course, I mean, I think the third and final takeaway from me is yeah, we touched upon this. It's not the volume of information sources that counts, and that's not the key measurement that you should put on a news provider. It's more the quality of the sources and how they've been selected and qualified as well. So I think those three things are probably my key takeaways from this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. It's interesting. The information as a strategic tool is
Yeah.
something that is changing with AI. You may have a system that was built to do one thing, but then with the application of AI over the data, actually can tell you some other things that might be equally or even more valuable to an organization.
Yeah.
And yes, you're right about the quality of data.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks so much, Toby. I'm sure we could continue talking about these topics for a long time. There's a lot of fascinating things happening in this news industry. But let's see if we can allow some of the participants to ask questions as well, or comment, or any thoughts from the audience.
The first one is, how should you manage copyright and licensing risks when dealing with sources?
That I get asked several times every single day. So it's a balance. There is nothing is risk-free in this world. We always assure our customers that we will do absolutely everything that is possible to mitigate and reduce risk. But at the end of the day, everything does carry a level of risk, and it's a balancing act, really. I had a conversation with one of the really big famous professional consulting firms end of last year, and they were adamant that, or at least their legal team was adamant that they didn't want to use a web crawling tool because they didn't like the idea of doing web crawling. And I said, understand that view. If that's the case, then fine, we'll say thank you and we'll go our own separate ways. But you need to balance whether the risk of not using content that's on the web is outweighed by the risk of using the content. And the guy kind of laughed and said, yeah, fair enough, we'll have a think about it overnight and we'll get back to you. And genuinely, I thought I'd never hear from him again. And then the next morning, the business user said, I'm surprised to say, Toby, that we've decided to go with you because the guy's completely changed his mind. And the point was, the risk of not having information nearly always outweighs the risk of having it.
Yeah. Even so, but that means that there's kind of a gray zone there as well, or
there's absolutely a gray zone.
You can't guarantee that everything you get is copyright.
You can't guarantee that everything is copyright, but certainly can't guarantee it's copyright free because it won't be. No. You can't guarantee, when you're crawling 250,000 sites, you can't guarantee that one of them hasn't changed their rules overnight. So there are no guarantees. We will do everything that is possible for a web crawler to ensure that we never deliver content that a client isn't allowed to receive. We will never knowingly deliver content that they're not licensed for if they need a license, and all of those types of assurances around that. But there is no cast iron guarantee. And also, even if it was a license feed, it would be quite possible for a customer to receive it and then do something that was outside the terms of the license. So if once information goes into an organization, doesn't matter if it's licensed or web crawled, whether someone's used Google to find a news story, there is a risk involved with what the person inside that organization does with that content. And more often than not, I would posit it's usually reduces the risk if they've got more information than it increases the risk.
Thank you so much, Toby. I think our time is up. So I'm happy to do this, and thanks for the chat.
Pleasure. Great to talk to you again.
And as mentioned before, for any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact us using the email address displayed on the screen. We look forward to the opportunity to connect with you again in the near future.